Alright, so I just wanted to go over something really quick that's pretty important for Unity, and it's something that I should have went over but didn't get a chance to do or I forgot. So I'm just gonna record this video, go over the concepts, and then if you guys have any questions, you can ask at any time. So basically, the thing that I wanted to talk about is prefabs, and prefabs are kind of like a core thing with Unity. So to get right into it, we remember our target animator and target holder and all the little pieces that make up the target thing that we were talking about before. And so what a prefab does is, first let me just explain about like how you can edit stuff. So like, let's say you wanted this target here to be green instead. You're like, okay, I changed that one to green. You're like, okay, well, I want all the targets to be green. So yes, you could select them all, and you could change them to be green that way. And I missed one even, so that can be a little tedious. And then you go, okay, now they're all green, that's what I wanted, cool. So then, like, what if you wanted to have multiple of these game objects, like multiple targets, you know, so you can duplicate it. Now we have two, and if you were to play both of them actually, well, it won't do that, but in play mode it should show that they both animate. So as you're duplicating things, you can see, okay, that's both of my targets there, they're doing what I want. You're like, okay, well, what if I want them to be back to red? Okay, so then I would have to go into here, select all these, change it to be red, and then also do that for the other one. And what if you had, I don't know, 20 targets all around this room? So like that could be very, very tedious and all that kind of stuff. So to show you how prefabs can do changes, what I can do is take this entire object that has all of the elements and everything as a part of it, and drag this into our prefabs folder. You can see now that the target animator, I'm going to delete our secondary one there, that the target animator is blue, and all of the pieces have blue text, but this cube is blue, which means that this game object is the prefab. In our prefabs folder, we can see that it's there. And basically that's going to save all of the changes that we do to it. So if we were to drag in another target animator right now and put it to the side from our prefabs folder, it's identical. You can see that that one's also blue. But if we go into our prefab to make changes, and we go to our targets, and we change all those to be green, and we save those changes, we go back out. Well, now you notice that the other one that we drug in, those are all green as well. So any changes that you make to the prefab of this object, and if we bring in another one, it's going to be green. So now, if you had your 20 targets all over the stage, let's say, and you're like, okay, well, shit, I made a mistake, and we didn't want them to be green, or we wanted them to be a different shade of green, like still green, but like a darker shade of green. Instead of having to change all of those throughout the whole entire stage, you can go into any one of these arrows, because that leads you to the target animator prefab. You can go into your targets and change those to a different color. As soon as you come back out, there it is. All of your prefabs did that. And so other than just color, this is really useful for anything. Like you turn your third person player into a prefab so that any player game object you drag into a scene has all of the changes that you've been making. You add it to like the chair physics. When I had a chair that you could knock over, and I set the physics up on that, you would do that in prefab so that all of the chairs in your level now have that capability to be knocked over instead of having to individually set that up for each one. Another thing that we can do with prefabs that's pretty cool is, for instance, if we take this ball here and we turn it into a prefab. Now you can see the ball is blue, the ball is in our prefab folder, we have a prefab of a ball. We can drag it out into the scene. That's another ball that has all of the same components, the rigid body, the script, all of that stuff. The reason you don't have the cam assigned to this thing here, but you do on this ball, is because the prefab doesn't know what the camera is because you assigned it in your individual scene. Like in the scene for this ball, you assigned the camera here. So that's how it knows the reference. The prefab just came from the folder. It doesn't know that reference. So what you would have to do is go into the ball's prefab, and then you would have to go in and assign the camera or whatever type of object that you would assign there. Now, you don't always have access to that stuff because not everything will show up in the scene that you have available. Like, you don't have access to the camera, so there are a couple of things that you have to do to get things assigned inside the prefabs, but we can go over that later. So now that we have this ball as a prefab, another thing that you need prefabs for is instantiation, and what that is the creation of objects out of thin air. So like bullets, objects, pretty much anything, effects, whatever. So to show that, what I can do is go into this pen, and how George before had his box collider trigger. I'm just going to go ahead and do that again. And what we're going to do is just do a really quick instantiate script. It's going to be very simple. So in this script, I'm going to get a reference to the ball prefab that we just created. So I'm going to do a public game object called ball prefab. Then I'm going to add an on trigger enter. Another quick tip I can give is something called tags. If we go to our ball here, you can see that it's untagged. And if I go to add tag, actually, I won't add a tag. What we can do is go back to the ball, and it's untagged. Let's tag it as the player. So this ball here is our player. That's the one that gets rolled around and can move up and down. So back in the pen's script, now that we have that tag assigned, we can say if other.gameObject.compareTag, which is a pretty cool thing to use. And inside there, you're going to use quotation marks and parentheses, and you're going to say the tag that you are going to be comparing, and you have to make sure that this is exactly case sensitive to the tag that you're using. So if other game object compare tag is player, so this is checking for if the other object that enters the triggers tag is player, then do this stuff. So then when the ball is the object that enters the trigger, we're going to instantiate. And then you're going to put in what the prefab that you're going to bring out of thin air. We're going to pull in our ball prefab that we're going to assign publicly in the inspector. Then you would do a comma. Then you're going to do the transform of the parent. So basically what this is the other data you're putting in is you can put in the position where you want the prefab to spawn, and then also the rotation that you want it to have when it's spawned. So for right now, we don't need to have it spawn anywhere specifically. So what we are going to do is the transform dot parent like it suggested, and all that's doing is instantiating the prefab that you chose it at the position, the transform position of the thing that this all is attached to, or the parent. So that would be the pen. That's where it's going to instantiate. So if we save that and we go back into Unity, and we can see that it needs the ball prefab. This is where you're going to go into your prefabs folder. You're not actually going to drag anything in from the scene because you want to create a new instance out of thin air of a new ball. You could also put in a chair or a player or a bullet. You can instantiate anything that's a prefab, and that's why they're important, because you need to have a prefab in order to instantiate it. You can't just instantiate some sort of object that you've been making here. You have to have the settings saved so the system knows what to create out of thin air, basically. So if we were to go into play mode, oh, sorry about that. Let's get this camera. All right, so if we were to go into play mode, move the ball forward, as soon as it goes into the pen, you can see that it instantiated another ball. And it did it again. And it could be that the transform.parent thing that I did was incorrect. I haven't used that one specifically before. So what we could change it to instead is we could try GameObject.transform instead. So this is the game object that the script is attached to, little g game object that the script is attached to. And since the script is attached to the pen, let's see if that did the trick. Well, it spawned it in a new location. So another thing that you could do is create an empty game object called a spawner. And a lot of people do this too for shooting bullets out of guns or anything like that. And you would drag this specifically where you want it to be. If you have an empty game object and you're having trouble seeing it because it's invisible, you can also click this little box up here and select any of these so that you can see the object in the 3D space, but it doesn't show up in the game. So now that we have that there called spawner, then back at our pen script, we can grab another public game object called spawner. So then instead, we're going to do the transform of the spawner. Transform.position. Let's actually try that. Oh, it won't let us. Okay, so just the transform. Save that. And let's not forget to assign our new public variable, which is the spawner. So it should spawn the ball right there. Actually, I'm going to move this a little bit to the left and up. All right, here we go. All right, so here's an important teachable moment. So the reason that the ball kept spawning to the side was that the prefab itself is set to different geological data. So to explain that, I wanted the ball to spawn here at the spawner right here, in this exact position, at these. So the ball is going to spawn right here. The problem is that the ball in its prefab is spaced differently already. So what we want to do is inside the prefab, reset the ball's position to be 0, 0, 0. So now the ball is there in its prefab. If we come back out and retry, now the ball should spawn right there. And it does. So that's pretty much prefabs.